Welcome back to the Camp Memories podcast from Kramer to the Hill, and the final episode of our three-part conversation with Dan Wolf, son of the founder, Rabbi Alfred Wolf, of Wilshire Boulevard Temple Camps and Camp Hess Kramer. In part three, we will discuss Dan's experiences with his children and grandchildren and his father's infernal optimism. And if you've missed it, parts 1 and 2 are linked in the card above and down in the description below. Enjoy.
Yeah. Speaking further on, the next generation, what were you thinking and what were you feeling when you first sent your kids to camp and when you first, saw them off for the first time?
And well, not only was I seeing them off, but so was my dad. He was seeing his
Right.
grandkids. He was there at the parking lot with the yellow buses and all. It was just very gratifying uh, to have it all continuing, and then for them, it's interesting because they they enjoyed their camp experience, but they didn't become as much camp people. They all became counselors, but they weren't going every summer. They took summers off to do other things and stuff. But their identity with the camp is extremely strong. But they didn't, go in, the 100% where it's like I guess the four of us, where every summer that was the focus. They were open to other ideas as to how to live in summer.
Yeah. Do you have some highlights of your perspective as a parent? I know that I can speak to my father, who is very proud of our enduring legacy of, leading the leadership hike. But what do you have some, highlights or moments of watching your kids enjoy and experience the same or similar camp, traditions that you grew up with that your father established?
Yeah, I mean, like a final last memory. My daughter was a senior counselor at camp in whatever summer that was, and a camper of hers who was looking up to her like we would look up to our counselors, and kids would look up to us, and all that, was the daughter or the granddaughter of Rabbi Harvey Fields at Wilshire Boulevard Temple, who became the senior rabbi after my father. So, and I remember going up on a Shabbat and seeing that relationship and seeing uh, yeah, and the Fieldses happened to be up there that Shabbat too. So that whole generational feeling with my daughter in the middle of it was profound, and I can still see, and I see Harvey then dancing with his granddaughter after the Shabbat dinner and stuff. It was sort of a microcosm of everything we're talking about.
Right.
How it
And I think that's, really where you know, where the generations have been able to, to meet each other and, you know, continue what the camps have really done that your father has, who started it, you know, as in the late 40s, early 50s for the next 75 years. It's really a testament to the strength of its programming, the strength of its leadership, and what it has done for not only all of us, but our children and in many cases, grandkids.
and I would add that it is as tragic and upsetting as the fire was, uh, to go to Carlsbad and see in this. Luckily, we're back near the ocean, but it's certainly a different physical plant than our canyon in Malibu, and to see how it's working, uh, and in some ways, the greatest testament to the concept being not dependent on a piece of ground, as much as we'd like to be back on that piece of ground. And if I can indulge a little anecdote, we went with our daughter and her husband and our granddaughter to a open house thing at the Carlsbad campus, and Jen Shankman was leading us around, show how it was all going, and our granddaughter was dressed in one of her many Disney princess outfits. Uh, and Jen said, and our granddaughter then was 3, and Jen said, "Do any of you have any questions?" And she said, "I have a question." And Jen goes down to her level and says, "What's your question?" And she said, "Do you like my dress?" So that was her first experience as, we hope, a future camper
A
at the
very
camp.
valid question, and
I,
I would hope she brings whatever costume she wants to bring when she
yes,
comes when she's old enough.
yes. So she may be dressing differently then, but maybe not. Uh, but that's another generational thing, and she was there again last summer for Shabbat, and so partly luckily because the camp has moved down here, she's getting this immediate exposure at a young age.
So, so let me raise just what is a little bit of a sad subject, which is that I guess when your father came to America, it was, during the rise of Nazism, right? Um, and uh, I think that if you talked to most camp campers and camp staff about the issue of anti-Semitism, it was large. I'm just hazarding a guess here. I haven't taken a scientific study, but I'm thinking that for most of them, this was something that they learned about affecting mom and dad, grandma and grandpa, something in uh, something that didn't affect their personal lives, right? And at camp, at least talking about my own experience, anti-Semitism was not, part of the normal experience, okay, at camp. Now, but personally, growing up the son of a Holocaust survivor, I have always had a little bit of a different experience, right? Because I do think about these issues no matter where I go, even if I'm at CHK, it's part of my life. But here we are now in 2026, right? And it's a different world. And issues of anti Semitism are now coming back. Not that we're entering into Nazism, we pray, but that the world is a little bit more like it was for your dad than it might have been in 1968 or 1972 at camp, although there was Vietnam War. I'm only bringing this up to say that it's a question of how we think about, the New World and anti-Semitism, and whether that has any role in thinking about, the future of camp and what our purpose is, the purpose of the Jewish education we give kids, and whether there's any connection between that looming subject of anti-Semitism and everything we've just talked about for the last hour.
Well, I think Dad, well, one thing, he was described once by an uncle apparently as an infernal optimist. And that was his general orientation, was that he felt things would be better, things can work out, despite or maybe because of what he had experienced. And while he certainly opposed, obviously, anti-Semitism, he certainly supported the state of Israel, he certainly was for saving Soviet Jewry, he was concerned that that mustn't be what defines Jews. In other words, if it's those are all negatives, right? Back when saving Soviet Jewry was a big deal, and saving Israel from its neighbors and fighting anti-Semitism, that's basically letting your enemies define you. And he always felt that Judaism had so many virtues, and that's what he wanted the camps to be about, is a positive identification. And because he felt if we're just defined as that we're against anti-Semitism and we eat bagels and we support the state of Israel, well, A, that's all negative, and B, uh, what if those things what if there is no anti-Semitism and the state of Israel is totally secure? Well, then I guess you're done, right?
Except for bacon.
And he thought that's ridiculous because we gave so much to the world. There's so much value and beauty, and that's what he wanted the camps to be about. It's fine that you integrate support of Israel and anything else, but he very much wanted to be much more than that. And he, I believe, if he were here, would say, yes, these are things to be mindful of. These are things we have to fight. These are things we can never be, apathetic about. And certainly today, he would say there are things that are very concerning that, as you say, weren't really on so much on the radar a few decades ago. And he was not naive, and he would certainly acknowledge all that. But he would say the best and essential armament against it is to build our positive Jewish identities and to nurture it in our kids. And one tool for doing that is something called Jewish Summer Camp. And he would say it better than I just did, and he would say it with more authority, and he would say it with a passion that was deep and real and came from a place of not just talking. He did these things, he created these things, and very much he felt that's who we are. And that's, he would say, and guess what, anti-Semitism not kind of a new thing. It goes back to the Pharaoh, right? And we're still here. And why are we still here? Because of all the attributes of Judaism that have sustained us. And that's why he was a Reformed Jew. He was raised quite traditionally, and it was a fairly radical thing that he decided to go into the liberal movement, because that's not how he was raised. But he felt that was how you vitalize Judaism. You don't just, it's not about it's just like it's not about just fighting anti-Semitism. It's also not just about keeping kosher and following, those rules. If you want to, fine. He had Orthodox friends and all that, but that wasn't the course he wanted. He wanted a Judaism that adapted, that applied its principles to modernity, and that is what really was the essence of the camp experience.
Yeah. I can definitely say that I have heard many times over the last few summers, especially in light of what's been going on the last couple of years now, is we have had a lot of kids who emphasize that, they're really happy to be here at camp where they can be Jewish, and it's not a thing about them. They're just a bunch of Jewish kids that are doing art, playing sports, dancing on Friday nights, and that they have the space to do that, which was obviously started, we wouldn't be here without the work that your father did, and that even you did as a counselor, and going on that journey that you went on.
And of course, he would also say, and it's not just about liturgy, and it's not just about studying. It's about, if you're playing baseball at camp, it's Jewish baseball.
Yep.
It's the whole Megillah. It's the whole package. It's that whole living 24 hours, not self-consciously, that it's who you are, and growing with it.
Yes, and without reservation.
Absolutely. And he was a big hiker, and you hike Jewish.
Yes, we
Yeah.
do.
Leadership hikes.
Yes,
Yeah, it was all.
and thankfully we continue that to this day.
Yes,
Yes.
indeed. And
So
lest it not be part of this discussion, I would like to just talk about Hilltop for a second, may I?
Please.
please, please.
Because that was, like I say, I was not a conscious being when the camp started. I was very much in 1966 when they bought the adjacent 80 acres to Hess Kramer. I was 15, 16, and was very into it. And I vividly remember Dad driving the Jeep, or it was the Scout, whichever
Yeah.
camp vehicle was in that year. I think it was still a Jeep, but maybe not. And four-wheel drive vehicle, and we drove up the rutted dirt road. There's now the paved road to what is now Hilltop, and we went up to this barren hill that looked just like every other hill in Malibu. When you look this way or that way from Hilltop today. You see it other hills that look like it did then. And he was telling me how they were going to have cabins there, we're going to have a dining hall there. We're actually going to have a lake, which didn't happen, in the saddle between the chapel and the rest of the camp. They envisioned a lake. The lake didn't happen, and we're gonna and we walked up to that other hilltop and said, "This is where the chapel is going to be," and I didn't get it. It sounds good, but I don't understand. A camp has to be in the bottom of a canyon. I don't know. I couldn't see what he was saying. I really couldn't. And and then of course the plans were drawn and the camp got built and I got to see that. And it was an experience to see what vision is. We talked about Walt Disney. He saw all that stuff in an orange grove in Anaheim. And Dad saw this camp on a hilltop, which I couldn't relate to as he described it. And uh, and that is, and I feel that I was able to transpose that experience, if you will, to what it must have been like in 1951 when they bought the canyon. And because actually there was, Dad told me about taking Wally Kelter, the rabbi who came with him in 1935 and ended up in Long Beach, and walking around the canyon and saying we're going to have a chapel there about that. And he told me that Wally said, you have such chutzpah that you see these things and they're not there. And then I was very excited to be part of, and in 1968, I was in the Hilltop Pioneer session where the camp wasn't finished. And talk about chutzpah, the fact that parents are expected to pay money to send their kids to this place that isn't finished and doesn't have plumbing. And we had the greatest experience. I mean, possibly that was the highlight of all my highlights at camp, when being there in this place that we were helping to finish and create. So it's just that, it's just sort of the sequel, if you will, to my talking about being there physically, but not aware when the camp started. But I really did see it with Hilltop, and then going there and being there as a camper and a counselor, and then visiting both camps, but feeling a particular, possessiveness of Hilltop, because that one, I I made a contribution to its creation.
You helped plant the trees that
Plant trees and the ice plant, a lot of ice plant.
and the I yes, yes, yes.
There were a lot
There was
of I remember that.
the great line was plant them, wait 10 years.
Yeah, and indeed, then driving on PCH, you could look up and see trees on top of that hill where the other hills don't have trees, and a lot of those trees have survived. Anyway, I thought that just want to make sure that story got told too.
Thank
Absolutely.
you
I
for
mean,
that.
yeah, I mean now Hilltop, and obviously the Hilltop menorah came later, but like I know that doing the drive, you have the big landmarks. You get past Pepperdine, you get past Trancas or whatever Trancas is called now, and then Leo Curio, and then you're waiting to see the Hilltop menorah. Then you get to the net and you hang a right.
That's absolutely, and that's luckily we still can talk about those landmarks because those were made not to burn. Look, there was the first Hilltop menorah was made out of wood, and the first big
Yes.
wind blew off some of the arms of it, and so then luckily they put up the one that's standing proudly there now. Uh, but it's um, anyway, it's all, and I know anybody who has any affinity for the camp, if they go by there, and if they drive on Yerba Buena and look down into it, it's not just another canyon, even after the fire. It's very evocative.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's not only it's the place, but it's also the people and the memories that that place evoked, and the camaraderie that we all created during our times there, that have been so impactful to I think all of our lives.
And I think you really hit the nail on the head with the aspect of being at the pioneer session at Hilltop, Dan, because it's such a foundational experience, right, for a person to feel that they're actually participating in creating something which is long lasting and which will they a part of them will carry on forward, right? And for camp to be able to continue to be that for people even after we're not creating a hilltop year after year, or maybe not creating a hilltop at all anymore, but still we have to somehow capture that. And when I say we, I'm wrong. I'm not making these decisions or this policy, but I mean the temple and the camps need to somehow capture that spark of the chalutzim that created, and that a part of them stays with the camp even after they're gone, right?
Well, I think that's part, it became a leadership tradition that there would be a leadership project that they would lead for the camp. So it was a way for them to have at least a piece of that kind of experience that I had during that pioneer session. You that you've contributed something. You're not just somebody whose parents paid for you to go to camp and then you go home. That you've left something of yourself, and it's very powerful.
And I know that,
Yes.
like your mother, who was doing arts and crafts, you said in the very beginning, so many summers, Jerry Schusterman, who was really a formative
Right.
part of my life, just dedicated her life, as did her husband, to those camps. You know, my best thoughts and memories go out to them and their family if they're still ever get a chance to hear this. They did so much to give that spark to people through arts and crafts, right? Make the stained glass window, which will go into Baru Hall and which will be there forever. And I
No,
just,
I mean, you start scratching the surface, and you're talking like Bob Brewer, Steve Brewer's brother. Uh, he was a counselor, and he did whatever the activity was called, crafts something, whatever. Anyway, he taught me how to do a square knot. Every time I tie a square knot, I think of him. I mean, these things, they can be very tiny, that you still just keep resonating with you. And
Lorraine Bubar, who was the she did arts and crafts at Gindling Hilltop Camp.
right.
These were these were part of not only our formative years but theirs as well.
Yeah. Although I have one great regret, I must say. In in 1970, right, I was a counselor at Hilltop, and I was in charge of the newspaper, and we gave it the name which became the Gindling Grapevine. And I wanted it to be called the Hilltop View, Daily View, which I just thought was poetic and wonderful. But I actually deferred to the kids and let them vote. And I should have done, I should have imposed my will. Don't you think?
What? No, no, no. What you're supposed to do, and I'm taking this. I would never do this, but it's you give them the options, and then you guide them
Yes,
towards you think that they're getting the vote to what they want, but
absolutely.
it's really what you want.
It was much too democratic, and I believe this is Chuck was the master, because Chuck would do. Am I correct? He would have kids compose. He'd have a group come together, and they would compose a song.
Mm-hmm.
And I strongly suspect Chuck had a very good idea how that song was going to come out.
100%.
But they all felt
100%.
they did it.
Yes.
He was a
Well,
master.
we were all there, which was half the battle. Well, Dan, I don't want to keep you. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us today and give us your memories of camp from Kramer to the Hill.
Absolutely. It's a great, beyond a pleasure for me to not only recollect, but to be, invigorated by people like you who've had varying forms of the same experience. We all, it's all, for everybody it's different, and for everybody it's the same. That's what's so fascinating.
Very
And
true. Very
and
true.
and on and
And
on.
thanks so much, Dan. We appreciate it.
Thank you for asking me.
Thank you again for listening to our conversation with Dan Wolf. I know I had a great time. I am sure Paul and Paul also did. As we move through, don't forget to reconnect with Wilshire Boulevard Temple camps. If you are not currently in touch, you can keep to date on things going on at camp, the rebuild, what's happening every summer, all the alumni events. Come to the alumni events. So make sure your contact information is current. You can do that by going to wbtcamps.org/alumni/update your info, which will also be linked down in the description. In our next episode, we will be back with another conversation with a guest to be named later to discuss more of our favorite camp traditions. Don't forget to like this episode and subscribe and hit the bell for notifications so you get notified every time we drop an episode, and we will see you in the next one.